Good evening, and welcome to the Atheist Forum. I am your co-host for the night, or one of them at least. I'm Brent Yashu. My guest co-host here is Kirkhart of the Atheist Alliance International. Yes, it's not just a couple of us fruitcakes in the local channel here. We actually have members all over the world that disbelieve. So we're going to talk to you tonight, as a matter of fact, about a lot of those people from all over the world that are going to be coming into this town. Yes, there's going to be an invasion this weekend of rational thinking people from all over the world. So all you Bible thumpers and other fanatics out there can just, cringe, or, you can sit there and look at your little books and read them over and over again. We're looking for the people who actually have a reasonable amount of intelligence, and hoping they'll be interested in some of the things that people have to say. But yes, we're going to have internationally recognized speakers in Tampa that are not crooks, unlike Oliver North, for example, who's been invited many, many times to come speak. We're going to talk tonight and do a little bit of an unusual format. Instead of having one long session at the beginning where we talk about a subject and then we go to the phones for the last half hour or so, we're going to kind of break it up into different segments and have a short discussion of the people that are going to be coming. For example, we're going to talk about Richard Dawkins to start with, who is one of the world's foremost biologists. We're going to talk about Darrell Lambert, who was too honest to be a Boy Scout, and Deacon Fred of Landover Baptist Church, which happens to be one of the funniest parody sites on the web. But anyhow, we're also going to have the phone going in, and the phone number there, we can be reached at 254-7820.
One dude.
First going to mention my host here, who's going to give us our definition tonight. And actually, I'll let you tell them about yourself rather than me tell them all about you, since I'm no expert on your life, and you probably are.
I know a little bit about it, yes. I grew up in a very religious home, and I was very religious, liberal Protestant, taught Sunday school in college, and became an atheist after I grew up in the Bible Belt, and after I got out of the Bible Belt, but mostly because I was a county social worker working with very poor, mostly Black and Latino women, and I saw what my God was doing to his most loyal servants, and it didn't add up anymore. I had grown up with a all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God, and clearly he wasn't all three of those. So when I started to question, ultimately the only thing that made any sense was that there was no God of any kind, at least not one that had any sort of interaction with us. I'd like to say something about your comment that there are non-believers all over the world. In the developed world, the United States is the most religious country. And atheism, for example, in Great Britain, where Richard Dawkins comes from, is about 49% of the population. In a lot of Western Europe, it's even a greater percent. And the fundamentalism and extreme religion that we have here is almost unheard of in the rest of the developed world. I remember 2 young college students in Denmark, and they were both religious, but telling me with wide eyes that they had once met a young man who believed in the Adam and Eve story. And they couldn't believe that there was such a person, but they met him themselves. We have a member in Minnesota who is a visiting scholar from Finland. And in this country is the first time he'd ever heard of anyone taking the ancient myths of the Bible literally. So I have good friends in Germany who consider themselves quite religious. They're a very conservative religious family, which means they go to church 2 or 3 times a year, and they pray before a meal on Sunday. So being religious in much of the developed world is quite different than it is here, but being non-religious is much, much more acceptable.
That's interesting because just recently I was reading a story that somebody sent me online about the fact that something like 58 or 78, I can't remember the number, Church of England ministers had openly declared that they did not believe in the literal existence of a God, and that they thought that, well, they kind of treated God and God belief and the stories in that as pretty much the same way we would see Bugs Bunny or something like that, things that were made up to entertain children and that weren't meant to be taken seriously as far as reality, but that were meant for good moral tales. I should say maybe more like Grimm's fairy tales, where there was always the moral to the story. Yeah. And the same thing was true of the Bible as far as they were concerned, that it was, you know, there wasn't really a God. It was just this was a way to reinforce the moral of the story. Right. So,
a few years ago, a priest came out in the Church of England and said, "I am an atheist," no holds barred, very openly. And I happened to be in England at the time, and I'm all in favor of free rights, equal rights for atheists. But I thought the Bishop of Canterbury was fair to defrock him. But the rest of the priesthood was up in arms. There was a very big brouhaha. And I think since that time, people have been much, much more open about their non-belief in the priesthood. I just recently talked to a young woman who's working for, I won't say the denomination, but a liberal denomination. And she's working for their social service, one of their social services things, which means she's working for the government, because that's always government money. But, and she was mentioning that because she's an atheist, she wanted to change careers. And she mentioned this to a priest that she works with. And he said, "Oh, well, you should come into the priesthood." You know, and she felt like he didn't get it, but she kept saying, but I'm an atheist. Well, you know, but you're good with people. So a great many people who are in the churches, even in this country on Sunday morning, are in fact atheists.
I found that many of them don't like the word atheist, even though they actually are. And that was actually mentioned in the article about the Church of England priests, was that although many of them did not believe in an actual God that existed, they said, well, we don't consider ourselves atheists because we do believe in God. We just believe that God was an invented character, like I said, like Bugs Bunny or something like that. We don't believe in the literal existence of a God, but we don't call ourselves atheists because, well, we believe in this invented character. And I'm like reading that and saying, well, actually, I believe God was an invented character. You know, I believe that human beings invented God, and under that circumstance, under that caveat, I would be just as religious as they are.
I think that, and this is a problem. This is a problem when well-educated, intelligent people kind of go along with the God idea. My definition of an atheist is a person who believes that morality begins with the truth. These little morality tales of the Bible, some of them are very good, and some of them are horrendous.
Oh, yes. Well,
and the suggestion that you can find morality in pretending that fiction is truth is offensive to me. There's no such thing as a noble lie. All lies,
exactly.
There are white lies, but not noble lies.
Well, that brings us actually right into our first speaker, or the first speaker we're going to discuss tonight, who has provided us with our quote of the night. Richard Dawkins has a significant interest in morality, and he says, blind faith can justify anything.
And of course it can.
Exactly. And when we talk about ethics and morality, essentially, it doesn't do any good to talk about ethics and morality when you're using religion in the same breath, because if you have blind faith, if your ethics are based on a blind faith in something that you really have no idea whether or not this God exists or what this God says, then it's always open to interpretation. And so it leads to being no ethics at all.
Right.
As I said, Dawkins is one of the world's foremost biologists. Many of the people in this country who are religious, as you said, they're a little more fundamentalist than around the world. They also oppose evolution. I find that kind of humorous because they think that, well, if we oppose evolution, if we can somehow show that there's a flaw in evolution, that people are just going to jump and say, oh, the world didn't evolve exactly this way. That must mean Jesus did it. And it's like, no, that's not the way it works. Even if someone were to find some significant flaw in evolution, in current evolutionary theory, that would not mean that I'm just going to jump up and say, well, okay. Did it. But anyway, I think it's about time to start getting to some of our callers for a few minutes. Speaking of the topic of evolution, first I want to throw in our standard disclaimer, and that is that we do not speak for any organization. Neither I nor Bobbie, even though we're members of organizations, speak for Atheist Alliance International, the Atheists of Florida, or any other organizations. Our opinions are our own as human beings with the right to have opinions, which seems to be something a lot of people in this country don't want to recognize anymore. And we do have a caller. Let's see what our caller has to say. Caller, you're on the air.
Hey, I'm a self-proclaimed atheist.
Good.
Wonderful.
And I'm wondering, I had just found divinity in Jerry Cantor.
Jerry Cantor. I'm not sure I know who that
Jerry
is.
Cantor. I just found divinity in Jerry Cantor. He is my Lord and Savior. He is my God. I must turn you on to Jerry Cantor.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what. First thing you'd have to do is tell us who he is.
He's on Friday nights at 10 o'clock.
He's on Friday nights at 10 o'clock on this station?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll check out his show.
Lobster Talk.
Thank you. Caller, you're on the air. Well, I'm hitting the button. Apparently, we're running into some technical difficulties. I'm hitting the button, and the line is not picking up. Let's try it again here. Caller, you're on the air. Well, maybe you're on the air. Are you there? Okay, I guess that caller's not there. Let's try this one. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, you both are talking about atheism here, and you just had
That's
a caller
true.
that was very, very much involved with you two watching another atheist, right? And
Well,
We don't
hang
know.
on.
we don't really know what he's wanting us to watch. It's
Well, hang on one second. Hang on one second. Don't you think that what you're doing is also starting another form of religion?
no.
People need something to believe in.
Well, first
Well-
off, let's.
Hang on one second. I'm not through.
Well,
Let
you've already made two statements that we have to already discuss. Number one, you made the statement that don't you think
Well,
you
what
asked
is an
two
atheist?
questions.
He doesn't believe in what? Just God or anything else?
Anything that can't be proven.
Okay.
Anything that can't be proven. You both look at each other. She doesn't look at the TV this way when she talks, so you're both feeding off each other.
Actually, let's clarify a few things. Number one, atheism is not a religion because we don't have a dogma, we don't have a deity, we don't have any of the other things that fit into a religion.
Have a belief.
I'm looking at her because
Have a belief.
she's my guest and I'm wanting to see if she has something to say. Actually, I
Besides,
just met her tonight.
I'm a
Well,
very
have a
good-looking
belief,
woman.
not?
But
And the belief that there is no God,
well,
but just not a...
no,
But
let
she
me-
keeps talking about...
Wait a minute.
Let me
Caller,
tell
let
you-
her,
let me
let
answer
her,
your question,
answer your
sir.
question.
kept saying, in this country, and in this country, but in Europe, they do this and they don't do
Caller,
that.
you're going to have to let her answer your question or we're going to hang up on you.
Well, do whatever you feel like it.
Okay.
The difference between free thought, which
Keep
is what
looking,
most
Dan.
atheists are, we're free thinkers. We don't have an absolute conviction that there could not possibly be a God.
Oh,
If a
okay.
God appeared, I'm sure you'd be glad to have him on the show if he could prove
so in
he
other
was a
words-
God.
In other
What
words,
we
you're
do
saying there
believe
might
in.
be a God.
I'm
but yet you're an
saying that
atheist.
it's extremely unlikely.
But why is it unlikely?
And
Have
I'm
you been
saying
that
that the
unhappy in
gods,
life,
the
or what?
better known gods, the God, for example, of the Bible, is obviously non-existent because
Why?
because the Bible is self-contradictory.
Which Bible?
His
The Old
definitions-
Testament? Are you talking about Testaments
I'm
here?
talking about both
Take
Old
your
and
pick.
New Testament. But the definition of religion comes from the word to tie down.
It's a need.
And you're tied to. And certainly people need a way, not necessarily a belief in the sense of not having
Not a
anything
belief.
that they, of having something that they will stick with
They
regardless
need
of
it,
evidence.
not a belief.
But people do need a method of coping with the world.
And you think it's leaving God out.
Well,
Well,
first
I'm-
off, you
I'm-
can't leave something out that's not there to begin with.
Yeah.
Caller, I have to
Not
ask
in
you a
your life.
question. Caller, I have to ask you a question. Do you believe in unicorns?
And unicorns?
Yes.
No, I don't believe.
Why don't you believe
I
in
don't
unicorns?
believe in nasty-looking suspenders either, but that doesn't
Why
mean
don't
anything.
you believe in unicorns? Well, I don't know what you've got on, and it may be, maybe I don't want to know what you've got on.
Hey,
But
what did they do? They just keep your pants up
I'm
to
asking.
make you look better.
Okay.
All right?
Next caller. Let's see if we get somebody who's somewhat rational there, who's not who's maybe interested in something more serious than what clothing I'm wearing.
Yes, Brent, it's me.
It's you. Hi, Bill. How you doing?
How are you?
I'm fine.
I would like to ask your friend,
Okay.
at what age was she when she rebuked the Word of God? At what age, ma'am? Don't say anything else, just what age?
Well, I will say that I would not have I did not rebuke the word of God because it's not the word of a God, but I was 23.
What's that now?
She was 23.
You were 23. All right, now Joe Redner, he was 39. And I think Mr. Brent there, Yasue, I can't pronounce his last
Yashu,
name.
just like sneezing.
Very nice guy. I would like to say this, that I would rather live in a world that is where my life is surrounded by mystery than to live in a world so small that my mind could comprehend it.
Well, but let me address how my take on that, because I think in my mind, this is more or less turned around religion and the idea of a God, and most commonly we have the God of the gaps. Well, if you can't explain this, then God must have done it. That is a tendency of the human mind to try to settle things and to try to deny the mystery, to say, well, God did it. There's much mystery in this world.
You know,
since I have been free of religion, I have been happier. I've been certainly much more moral, ethical person, and have been able to enjoy a great deal of the mysteries of the world. If you read Richard Dawkins, you have a wonderful sense of awe at what nature has done and what science has discovered and what is yet to be understood.
Yeah, I would actually have to say that, caller, Bill, I think you have it backwards, because atheism is the one that recognizes that the world is full of mystery. We go out and investigate those mysteries through science and rational thinking, and we try and find out, but we recognize that there are a lot of things that can never be explained. On the other hand, religion tries to reduce that to one simple, understandable, or at least they think it's understandable idea. They say, well, if we can't figure it out, then it must be God. And that's a really simple answer, but it's not really an answer, because then you come up with the question of what is God, and where did God come from, and why did God do these things? So it's not really an answer. But I would say that it's actually, for at least the majority of people that follow a religion, they're looking for simple, easy, and quick answers to reduce the mystery in the world. So I think your impression's exactly backwards. We're the ones who appreciate mystery. We don't look for our answers in one book. We look for our answers in lots of books and read lots of different books. And
if you were looking at your answer this way, and I was to say, look up in the sky, up past the moon, past the stars, and how far can you go before you become to the end?
That would be infinity. There is no end that we know of.
Well, if there is no ending, where is the beginning?
There is no beginning that we know of.
It's the Alpha Omega.
Well, see, again, that's the limitation of the human mind. There is no end, there is no beginning. Our human minds can't very well grasp infinity, or let's just say the majority of people have a hard time grasping infinity. I can tell you this from teaching math classes and teaching algebra, that many people have a very difficult idea saying, well, you know, if you divide infinity by 24, what's your answer? Well, it's infinity. If you divide infinity by 50, it's infinity. If you divide it by 1,000,000, it's infinity. That's very hard for many people to grasp, but that's the reality of infinity, is that it just keeps going and going. It's like the Energizer Bunny, only even more so.
And that's mystery.
Yes, that's mystery.
That's an appreciation of the mysterious.
But you notice that when people get older, you know, when they're young, everybody wants to get their kids baptized, and they want them to repent and be good Christians. Most people. I'm saying 96% of America does that.
Well, I wouldn't say it's 96% of America, but...
well, whatever percent, more
about 40%.
than atheists. And when these people do this, generally, kids fall out with God, and they go through their lives. But when they get older, they'll tend to turn back and see the mistakes they made, and they don't want to do it with their grandchildren or their great-grandchildren.
I don't know that that's, again, exactly true, because there are an awful lot of older people that are involved in atheist organizations. Many of them do look back on the mistakes they made, and they say, boy, I sure wish I hadn't bowed to my parents' will and taken my kids to church. I don't believe it. I didn't believe it then, but Mom and Dad wanted me to, so I did it. As a matter of fact, I wish I hadn't bowed to my parents' will and gone to church myself.
I have a good friend who will be at this conference who talked to me recently about having gone to church for years, at the church they grew up in, and her sister went. They were in different cities, but to the same church. And one day they sat down and talked and realized they were both atheists.
Yeah.
And they'd been going to this church all this time. I will be 60 tomorrow. I've been through breast cancer, very aggressive breast cancer, and nothing has made me want to find your God, because I knew that God concept, and I firmly believe that if that kind of God were around, then people wouldn't be turning their back on him or falling out of him. What good does it do to be a God if you can't communicate your message a little more effectively than this God seems to do it?
Well, this God has already blessed you to live to be 60 and not even believe in it.
Well, again, you're talking in circles, Bill. You believe that it was God's blessing that made her 60. We don't believe that, but
Okay.
we've got to move on.
But
Thank you.
did
for
was it God's blessing that gave me breast cancer?
Well, I don't think he's going to want to answer that one, and that's the one we've not been
Yeah.
able to. We're going to move on to our next topic, our next speaker, talk a little bit about Daryl Lambert. The story there is kind of interesting. Daryl Lambert was a person who was too honest and moral to be a Boy Scout. Yes, I know that's the popular conception, is that that's what scouting is all about, but Daryl decided that he could not actually honestly believe in God. He said, I just can't buy that concept. And he was honest enough to, instead of like many scouts that are out there, as a matter of fact, many preachers that are out there, he was honest enough to say, I just don't believe this. I'm a good moral person. I believe in most of the things that the Boy Scouts teach, but I just can't lie anymore. And for that, what did they do? Did they shower him with accolades, give him a trophy? What did they do to him?
They kicked him out of the Scouts. Now, they gave him a chance. They told him 10 days. You have 10 days to choose a God, any God. Now, this was a kid who had worked to be an Eagle Scout. If you know anything about Eagle Scouting, you work most of your young life to get there. And he was fully qualified as an Eagle Scout, except that he'd done it on his own. He didn't have a God. And he was not the product of an atheist organization or anything other than his own conscience. But he had the morality and the ethics to stand up to his own conscience and to follow his own conscience. And they gave him 10 days to choose a God, and he somehow didn't find a believable God in those 10 days.
Actually, what they did was give him 10 days to pick a lie.
Yeah, exactly.
Which God are you going to lie to us and tell us that you believe in? And I find it kind of ironic that the Boy Scouts wanted to force somebody to lie, but again, there you are. And now, I have to admit that Boy Scouts, if it were a normal private organization, they have the right to pick their standards, low as they are. They have the right to do whatever they want if it were just a normal private organization. The problem is the Boy Scouts is not just a normal private organization. They have a congressional charter. That means our government officially sanctions the Boy Scouts. And this gives them access into our public schools, for example, when other organizations do not have it, because they have a congressional charter. So because the Boy Scouts is a quasi-government organization, I believe that it firmly violates the Constitution for them to require any type of religious belief. It violates the article, I think it's 14, that says that you should not, there shall be no religious test for public office.
Yeah. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion.
Yeah. Well, that's the
Amendment
First
1.
Amendment.
Right. Congress charters the Boy Scouts. That is a law respecting the establishment of religion.
Exactly. Anyway, we'll see what our callers have to say about the morality. Caller, what do you have to say about the morality of forcing someone to lie?
Actually, I don't know what to say about that, but I did have one question for the both of you, if you didn't mind.
Okay.
I was just wondering if either of you were married.
I'm married. Married 5 years. This marriage, I was married for some time when I was younger, and he's now deceased, and I've been married 5 years to a man I met at my local atheist group at Atheists United.
I was
And my
wondering,
daughter
was
is
your
married to a
marriage
man she
in a
met
church?
at Atheists United. No, we were married. There are many ways of atheists of Freethought ceremonies. There are humanist counselors who do ceremonies. We were married by a man who's a humanist counselor at and was once an ordained minister in a wonderful Freethought retreat on the West Coast called the Cedar Springs Foundation. And our friend Bill Young married us there. It's up in the mountains, and we took about 20 friends and stayed up there for a weekend. And it was a great party, and we wrote our own vows, of course, and I have described the place as atheist heaven, and that's how Bill started the ceremony, talking about what atheist heaven would be like.
Now, for the other person that's the host.
Well, I was married before. I was actually married twice before. I was married once to someone in a it was in my choosing, or hers actually. It was a concession to her mother, who was paying for the whole shindig. And we did insist, however, on having relatively secular vows. The second time I was married was by a notary public, and that was definitely not a religious ceremony at all. But actually, I've found that even the ceremony of marriage doesn't really agree with me much. I have had my current relationship is on about its 6th year, and we've never had a ceremony. We don't have the same religious views, but we can respect each other's religious views, or lack of them in my case, and we just don't find the need for someone else to certify our relationship. Which unfortunately the government wants to stick its nose in and cause a lot of hassles, but we've done pretty well at managing to work our way around those problems.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just wondering exactly how all that worked. If you don't mind, I think my friend has a question. Do you mind if I put him on real quick?
Well, let me put in one little statistic. Atheists and Catholics and Lutherans have the lowest divorce rates. Baptists have the highest in this country. So, just
okay. We have somebody else with a question there.
Oh no, he's a little. I guess he's a little shy on the phone. But thank you very much, though, for your help.
Well, thank you, and we'll move on to our next caller. Next caller, you are on the air.
Hello.
How you doing?
How are you wonderful people doing today?
Turn down that TV. Yes.
All right. I've been listening to you guys. You guys are very interesting and entertaining. I have a question for you. You're talking about America being the most religious country that there is.
No, the most religious of the developed countries.
The most religious of the developed countries. So the undeveloped countries are still in the primitive religions that they all started with.
Well, some of them are in religions. I don't know what religions you consider primitive. They might be a shorter list than the religions I might think of as primitive. But certainly undeveloped countries include a great many Christian countries.
Okay. And because I share some views with you, and I do believe that there is a God, but I don't believe it's a man sitting on a throne waiting to drop the hatchet on our head, you know. Life in itself, I think a lot of people are confused, thinking that there's a God that's sitting up there saying, okay, be this, be that, but he is only the natural, God is only the natural world that we had in its raw form, not a person casting judgment. Okay, and I just want you guys to maybe reflect on how America has commercialized religion for its governmental and financial benefit. And I'll hang up. I don't want to waste your time, but just give me some reflection on those questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
That's a very good point, though, that if religion didn't make money in this country, it would cease to exist. And one of the theories about why we are so religious is specifically because it's not funded by the government. So all of the preachers are out there hustling for a buck, and they have to use good PR. I think that's part of it. I think most of it is all of the preachers, that we have this huge variety of religions so that people can pick and choose, and it makes non-belief seem more extreme than it is.
Well, and here's the other thing that I think is very ironic too, is that the very religious freedom that is part of our Constitution is what has made this a haven for religions. Because in many countries where religion is an official thing, most people see it as just a tax burden. Many people in countries with an official religion almost never go to church. They don't really believe in it, and they really are not in favor of it at all. And no one comes out to bother them about it. I mean, the priests and preachers and all that have no real incentive, I guess you might say, to go out and hassle people. I mean, you don't get people coming and knocking on your door trying to pitch their religion when they have nothing to gain by it, because they're officially backed by the government and they get money anyway. And their salaries are set by the government. In our country, and again, it does go to the commercializing of it. In our country, if a preacher goes out there and he does a good job of pitching to people, well, he gets to drive around in Cadillacs or Lexuses or Mercedes, and maybe even get his own private jet. He can become Billy Graham and wear $600 suits and things like that, or Pat Robertson. And stuff away all the money in Swiss bank accounts or something of that sort, I mean, nobody actually pays any attention to where that money goes, so who knows how many more Jimmy Swaggarts or Jim Bakkers are out there. But that's one of the things that has made it. It's capitalism in its purest form. They're selling you afterlife insurance. They're saying, if you buy into our policy, if you buy into our little book here, our belief system, then after you're dead, you're going to get the big reward, but pay us now.
Incidentally, one of our local groups, Atheists United of Los Angeles, you can go to their website, atheistunited.org, and contact their president through that, will sell you a deed, a numbered deed for an acre of land in heaven for only $100. It's on Cloud 666, so the real estate was cheap, and it's a deed that's suitable for framing. And if you go to heaven and are denied access to that land and return, they will give you triple your money back, so long as you can prove that happened.
That actually kind of reminds me of before it turned to the year 2000, I made a standing offer to several people, and no one took me up on it, who claimed that they were absolutely certain the world was going to end. They said that, the year 2000, that was going to be the coming of the rapture, and therefore all our worldly possessions would be meaningless. So I told them, I said, well, look, I'll buy your house, your car, all your possessions, every single thing you own. We'll just put it in a contract, and I'll give you $100 for it that you can have and spend right now. Now, of course, if the world ends, then I've just thrown my money away. But if the world doesn't end, then of course I get all your stuff. So if you're really that certain, sell it to me. And I was just amazed. I had no takers. It's funny how when it comes down to it, people don't really believe what they claim they believe. We'll go to our next caller here. Caller, you're on the air.
Hey, I just tuned in a little bit ago, and I'm sorry I didn't get your co-host's name, but I heard her say her birthday's tomorrow. I just wanted to say happy birthday.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
You got an interesting show. Keep it up.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, next caller, you're on the air.
Hello. I've been watching your show for like a couple of weeks. I'm atheist myself, but my belief is that, you know how they say there's a higher being? I think Jesus was one and the same, because I believe that he wrote a book and it became big, and it's kind of like this. You ever heard of Peter Pan, or imagining yourself as another character and thinking that we have the ability as human beings to think that we are another person?
Well, certainly I've imagined myself being another character. I usually wasn't Peter Pan, but Superman maybe. It'd be fun to be Superman, especially that X-ray vision. That'd be great. But
I think it was that Jesus was stressed out and he wrote that he met someone. I just think that Jesus being him as God are one and the same person. My God, they have so many things to follow under. If you do this, you'll go to hell. And I tell people at my school, I'll go, hey, if I go to hell, I'll check in Satan's hotel room. There you go.
That's probably the nicest place there. Right? Probably nicer than the
Mark
rest
Twain said, go to heaven for the climate and hell for the company. But But I want to make one point, is Jesus didn't write any of that.
Moses wrote before Jesus, I know that.
Well, Moses didn't write any of that. If either of them actually existed, it was other people who wrote it. And the New Testament, the Gospels, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that are supposedly about Jesus' life, were written at the earliest possible date for the earliest one that we have in existence now would be 70 AD. And it's kind of interesting because when a doomsday cult, when people who think the world is going to end, when the world doesn't end, is usually the first time they become evangelical. They're not, they before that tend to be fairly closed. It's hard to get in. Well, remember Jesus said that he would be back within a generation. And he said that it's very clear. There's no honest way to translate or interpret that Jesus did not say. He said, people alive today will be alive when I return. Well, guess what? When that generation ended is when we started getting the Gospels.
That's a good point.
In other words, once they knew he wasn't coming back, they decided, well, let's write all this stuff about him because he's not going to be around to deny it. See, that's another issue, is that we don't actually know, no one in the world, no matter how good of a scholar they are or think they are, no one in this entire world actually knows anything about Jesus, even if he existed. But let's assume he did exist. Nobody knows how true anything that was written about him was. People make assumptions because it fits in with their worldview or what they want to believe. But imagine
the Bible.
Yeah, well, just imagine that you died, and 40 years after you died, somebody wrote something about you. Now, if it was one of your worst enemies, they might write some pretty nasty things about you, and 1,000 years later, we'd have no way of knowing whether or not they were true, would we? Yeah. And if it was your best friend or your girlfriend or something like that, maybe you really impressed her, and she thought you were godlike, so she'd write about you and make you into a god. And again, we'd still have no way of knowing whether or not that was true.
But one thing we know about the people who wrote the Gospels is they never met Jesus.
Yeah.
So we don't have that problem, at least. They're writing what they've heard. There were earlier texts from Paul, but they didn't try to chronicle Jesus' life. And he never met Jesus also. No, there is no contemporary recording of Jesus' existence, which doesn't mean he didn't exist. But it does mean that he was not nearly as influential as, if he did exist, as modern Christians think he was.
Yeah, you'd kind of think that something like that, a guy who was wandering around the country, turning water into wine and making bread appear and raising people from the dead and all that kind of stuff. Well, you'd think if something like that was going on, the word would get out and there'd be some other historian of the time that'd be running over there saying, where's this Jesus guy? I need to meet him. I want to write his life down. But no one did that. And as a matter of fact, just the fact that the whole story of the betrayal, if Jesus was so well known and everybody knew where to find him, then why was there a payment to expose him? Obviously he was in hiding somewhere, and why would a guy who knew he was going to die and knew that he was supposed to die intentionally and was going to do that? Why would he hide somewhere? Why would somebody have to pay somebody to find the guy? I mean, the whole thing just doesn't make sense when you start examining it logically. The problem is that most people don't examine it logically. They just say, well, my mom believes this stuff, so...
They believe in mommy and daddy, and they don't think for themselves.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I think for myself, most people in my school, we pretty much debate every day, and they're like, I go, mommy and daddy told you to believe in this, didn't they? And then they're like, no, I just believe in it because I go to church. I'm like, did your mom and dad bring you to church when you were little? And they'll go, yeah. And then I tell them, there you go.
Yeah, and it's an unfortunate reality of many young people today. I won't say it's just young people though, because you'll find out as you get older that a lot of older people are exactly the same way. They go to church because, well, it's what mom and dad taught them to do, and half of them don't really know a whole lot about what they believe. Ask a few Catholics, for example, about the doctrine of transubstantiation.
Yeah, I know, my family's Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, most Catholics have no idea what the doctrine of transubstantiation is. I've talked to quite a few of them, and I say, so do you believe in the doctrine of transubstantiation? They'll be like, huh? And it's like, well, wait a minute. This is one of the core beliefs of the Catholic religion, that wafer and wine actually turn into flesh and blood once they've entered your body. They actually believe in this, and of course they never stop to think, well, this is essentially cannibalism, but they don't even know what it is. They think it's symbolic, and the church's official position is that it's not symbolic, it really happens. But most of them don't know that, because most people don't really know much about their own religions. Well, we've got to move on, caller, but thank you for the call.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, it's about time to throw in our little short break again, our disclaimer once again.
Well, I do speak for the Atheist Alliance International.
Well, on this show, though, officially you don't.
I don't on this show. Okay.
Yeah, because just in case you were to happen to slip or say something
I don't slip.
that, okay, well, anyway, and then you're speaking for them, but, well, they don't necessarily represent.
I don't speak for every individual within the Atheist Alliance
That's our
International.
point. I mean, you can speak on some level for the atheists, but just like I don't speak for everyone in the Atheists of Florida, even though I'm a board member, there are people that disagree with me all the time. Lots of people disagree with me all the time. Even some of them in this room. Not you, but other people. But
I would never disagree with you.
Okay. I can't believe you wouldn't disagree with me. Everybody disagrees with me. Anyway, one of the things about atheisms, you may have noticed some hilarity on the show, is that atheists enjoy humor, and religion provides us with a great source of humor. And one of the people who's coming to the Atheist Alliance International Conference is Deacon Fred. That's not his real name, but Deacon Fred of Landover Baptist Church.
I want to tell you how I met him.
Okay.
This was at the Godless March in Washington, D.C. This is sponsored by another group, American Atheists, but a big gathering of free-thinking people from all over the country trying to tell Congress, hey, we're your constituents too. And I was in the speaker's tent talking with Norm Allen of African American Atheists and Humanists, and this man came in carrying a Bible. And we kind of looked at each other, and he was walking around with the Bible, and finally Norm said, well, hello, and he said, hello, and I said, I'm surprised you have a Bible here. And he said, oh, I'm a satirist and such, and he seemed like a very mild-mannered man. I was scheduled to speak right after him. He went out and shouted and danced and rolled on the floor. He had the crowd so excited. Oh boy, I can't.
What am I going to do after this?
I have this little inspirational speech about the joy of living in your own conscience, and nobody's gonna. But he had the crowd so happy to be there that it was easy to follow him. It was wonderful. He's just, his real name is Chris Harper, but he's the Reverend Deacon Fred. And you could come to the convention for that alone.
Or you can go to his website, Landover Baptist.
Well, but you should come to the convention because I want to meet you.
Well, yeah, but I was going to say, if you want to know a little bit about what to expect, go to the website. It's the funniest website on. Just look up Landover Baptist on Google or something like that, and you will be rolling in the aisles, unless, of course, you take it seriously, which...
well, there are two Landover Baptists, I understand, so you need to get the one who are not, in fact, Baptists.
Oh, okay. Well, I think his is the .org one. But anyway, we'll go to our callers and see what they have to say about, anything. Caller, you're on the air.
Hey, how do you do? I'd like answers to 3 questions, please.
Okay.
Do you draw a distinction between agnosticism and atheism?
Yes, we do.
right?
But I really would like to clarify that. Gnosticism is about knowing. An agnostic is a person who doesn't know with absolute certainty that there's no kind of God or gods. So most atheists are in fact agnostics. Atheism is about believing, and atheism is a person who has no God belief. So there are a handful of atheists who will say there could not possibly be a God, not even that deistic God that started everything and left. Most of us say, that seems unlikely. So we are, in fact, agnostics. Most agnostics, very few agnostics, have God beliefs. There are a few who do. There are agnostic Christians who say, well, I don't know for sure, but Jesus is my God. But again, that's a very small percentage. So the overlap between agnosticism and atheism is probably about 95%.
Second question. Can you be a-religious but not atheistic?
Yes, I would say yes. A-religious means you don't follow any organized religion or creed. Thomas Paine would be a good example of someone who was a-religious but not atheistic. He was a deist. He believed in a God. He believed in one God, and he had some pretty strong ideas about the nature he believed in this God. But he said, I do not follow the Christian religion, the Jewish religion, the Hebrew religion, the Hindu religion. As for me, I disbelieve them all. So Thomas Paine would be a good example of someone who was a-religious but not atheist.
I think most deists would be.
Yeah.
And before I ask my last question, I'd like to make a comment about Joseph Campbell's interpretation that a theist was a person who took the Bible at its word for truth, whereas an atheist interprets it as metaphor. And would you buy that line of thought?
I'd say maybe that's a little too general. I think there are many theists who interpret the Bible as metaphor. I grew up in a very religious, very Christian family who interpreted much of the Bible as metaphor. They did not interpret the life and death and resurrection of Jesus as metaphor, but they did interpret most of the Bible as metaphor. And on the other hand, as an atheist, I would say while there are beautiful, wonderful metaphors in the Bible, there's an awful lot of it that doesn't even work as metaphor.
And I was here. Now, here the ironic thing is, I was going to say, well, I think that's a little too specific, because I was going to say, well, theism and the believing in the Bible are not the same thing, because there are many theists, like Hindus, for example, who don't believe in the Bible either. Their religion has nothing to do with the Bible. So I would say there are a lot of theists who don't believe in the Bible, or pick a religious book. There are some people who are atheists about that particular book. As a matter of fact, we're fond of saying that most people out there are just almost as atheistic as we are. They don't believe in Zeus, Thor, Vishnu, all those other gods out there. There's just one God that they've decided to believe in. We just applied the same thinking that they applied to all those other gods to theirs, and so we don't believe in any of them.
And my last question, I appreciate both your viewpoints, and I think Campbell was talking about any form of scripture in that context.
Yeah, I think he was.
My last question would be, given the paucity of knowledge that we actually have in this 21st century, given the grandeur of the universe, how can we with certainty deny a deity?
Well, you can't. I mean, I can't deny that Santa Claus doesn't exist somewhere.
Well,
No, I'm being serious. I can't deny that Santa Claus doesn't exist somewhere. He may not exist as described in our stories, but I can't deny that unicorns don't exist somewhere. I mean, this is a simple fact of logic, is that it's pretty much impossible to prove a universal negative.
Yeah. And I have said before on this, I do not conclude to an absolute logical certainty that there could be nothing that might reasonably be described as a god. The deistic God, for example, could possibly exist. What I can say with certainty is if there's any God who is interacting with human beings and controlling this world as we live today, I have a problem with it. And I can say with certainty that I have no reason to believe in God until there's evidence for it. I can't say with certainty that there's not a man named Mork on planet Zircon.
Yeah, I would note the difference between myself and someone who is a believer is neither of us knows for sure whether or not unicorns exist. I can't prove unicorns don't exist, neither can anybody else. I, on the other hand, don't put food out for them, and a believer does. I mean, every time they put money in the collection plate, they're essentially saying, well, I'm going to feed that unicorn whether it exists or not. And that's the difference between myself and a believer, in a nutshell.
Well, I appreciate your time. I look forward to the next forum. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're getting almost close to the end here. A few more comments about the convention. It is happening this weekend. It's going to be right here in Tampa. It's at the Hilton.
At the Hilton West Shore.
Hilton West Shore, yes. Got to make sure you get the right Hilton. It's the Hilton West Shore, the one that's right over there near International Plaza. We will have lots of famous people there. I mean, besides the three that we focused on tonight, there are going to be people such as Michael Shermer, the publisher of Skeptic Magazine, James the Amazing Randi, who is well known here in Florida because he lives in Florida.
He's well known out in California, where I'm from too.
He's well known pretty much around the world, especially in England, where that guy who used to claim that he could bend spoons with his mind. Well, yeah, Randy demonstrated that what he really was doing was just putting him against his head and pushing.
Yeah, we'll have the infidel guy, Reginald Finley. We'll have
the internet infidel.
The internet infidel. We'll have another young person, Emily Rosa. Maybe you remember a few years ago, youngest person ever published in a medical journal when she was 9 years old. She's 16 now and still a very active freethinker.
She made the demonstration about therapeutic touch.
Right.
As a matter of fact, she was on a television special, and speaking of Michael Shermer, he was also on that same special, where they did a little demonstration. These people claimed that they could adjust your energy field. Well, she came up with a very simple test. All she had people do was put their hands in a blind enclosure where they couldn't see their hands, and she would hold her hand over one hand or the other and say, okay, am I holding mine over your right hand or your left hand? And amazingly, there were people that actually were on the show who thought that if they guessed 4 times out of 10 correct, they thought that was good. Now, of course, anybody who understands the basics of statistics knows you got a 50-50 chance. You only got a right hand and a left hand, so how accurate do you have to be? Anyway, we also want to talk about the Atheists of Florida. We do have regular monthly meetings, both here and in Pinellas County. We alternate. Our next meeting, I think, is happening here in Tampa, I believe. It's usually at the library, or no, it's happening in Pinellas. Happening in Pinellas County, but either way, visit our website or call us up or email us, and we'll give you all the details on that. We'd like to thank you for watching and calling in. Next week, get your friends to tune in. Call us. We try and take as many calls as we can. And we always leave with our little comment. So I'm going to turn over to Bobbie to introduce that.
Okay. Please remember, the evidence for all of the gods is about the same. If someone wants to tell you that their God is the right one,
make them prove it.